Hey everyone, this is Joshua Kirk here with you once again. Now it's time for episode 66 of Album of the Day, in which today's album is an album by definitely one of the most beloved bands in indie rock, and I'm here to review an album that's pretty much considered like one of the greatest rock and roll albums of the 1990s and one of the greatest indie rock albums of all time. I'm here to review the second album by Issaquah, Washington group Modest Mouse, who have been around since 1993 and put out a lot of great indie rock albums, but I'm here to review what's pretty much viewed as their best album by a lot of people. The album is called The Lonesome, Crowded West. This was released back in November of 1997, and it's Modest Mouse's second album, even though some people may argue a little bit with that statement. I mean, some people call like The Fruit That Ate Itself like an EP, others call it an album, but this is like the second CD for Modest Mouse that's like technically an album. It's got 15 tracks on it. It's got Teeth Like God's Shoe Shine, Heart Cook's Brain, Convenient Parking, Lounge Closing Time, Jesus Christ Was an Only Child, Doing the Cockroach, Cowboy Dan, Trailer Trash, Out of Gas, Long Distance Drunk, Luck, Trucker's Atlas, Polar Opposites, Bankrupt on Selling, and Styrofoam Boots / It's All Nice on Ice, alright. This is actually the reissue copy that is released on Isaac Brock's own Glacial Pace Recordings in Portland. So yeah, it's in a little digipack, which is pretty cool. There are the credits there, and it's got lyrics. Not really for all the songs, but for like a majority of them. And anyway, here we have a little sleeve which has the CD in it. And here, speaking of the album, I also have a vinyl copy of it. And the track listing's a little different on here because Baby Blue Sedan is track 4, and Lounge Closing Time is track number 15. So there's 16 tracks on the vinyl version. And it's got 2 sleeves. Here's the first one, which has, the side A and side B on it. Yeah, and I think there's a download card. Just felt a download card in the first sleeve. Okay, hold on. Here's the other one. There's the lyrics. Here we have side C and side D. And hold on a second. So yeah, that's my CD and my vinyl copy of Lonesome Crowded West, the reprint copies from Glacial Pace. So there are definitely many reasons why I wanted to talk about this album today. Of course, everybody loves this album for its raw production. It's it's wild vocals from Isaac Brock, as well as lyrics that talk, as well as very smart and clever lyrics that reflect on society. It's basically like an anti-commercialism kind of album, and I really do connect with that. So that's why I wanted to talk about this record. The opening track, "Teeth Like God's Shoe Shine," kind of shows you that you're in for one special album right off the bat. The track has has like that whiny guitar style that we all know and love from Modest Mouse, as well as Isaac Brock like going nuts into the microphone with the vocals, and like the lyrics talk about how there are malls that are being built, turning them the mall towns, they turn into ghost towns, and then all of a sudden they're building another one. So, and Isaac Brock has a really good use of metaphors in his lyrics too. There's a line in the song, "Let's all have another Orange Julius," which is kind of a weird, mundane thing, that kind of relates to like pop culture references. It's like a pop culture reference, basically. For those of you who don't know what Orange Julius is, it's like a chain that is it wasn't really supposed to be healthy. It was like this thick orange beverage, and since the song talks a little bit about kind of the negatives with malls being built, it makes sense that there's that little metaphor there, a funny little metaphor right there for the song. Then it follows with "Heart Cooks Brain," which shows the band, this song has a pretty unusual touch on it. It's like an indie rock song, but then it has a touch of turntable scratches on it to give it kind of a weird, unusual vibe, but it really does work with the song somehow. And once again, some great metaphors on here, with lines like, "My brain's the burger and my heart's the coal." So it's kind of a song about how your brain just kind of cooks up with different emotions. When your heart becomes a little bitter towards society a little bit. And then there's "Convenient Parking," which talks about how parking just doesn't really have any convenience anymore. Again, some very wild and very powerful vocals from Isaac Brock on this track. And then there's "Lounge Closing Time," which talks about cinnamon, different people like that obviously are selling big products that are basically, uh, this is a kind of song where I don't really need to tell you much about the lyrics. You could just listen to it for yourself. But I will tell you, the guest female vocals on this track sound pretty nice. Provided by Nicole Johnson. Jesus Christ was an only child uses religious statements as metaphors for money and for people making money and just working real hard to make money because of the internet, and it uses metaphors in the sense they're doing it and then it causes an uproar with the public, and the public just wishes they just stopped this whole thing before the big boom came up. So this album, basically the title refers to Isaac's frustration of his home of the West, Seattle to be exact, being just paved with, just people having to make money and stuff like that, talking about how it's kind of commercialized in, some of the worst ways possible. And this song also has a pretty unusual touch on it. It has the use of a fiddle on it, but it doesn't quite make it country. Instead, the fiddle just gives it a little something something that just makes it sound pretty unique, in my opinion. And don't know if that weird noise in the background of that song is a guitar or something else, but wish I could be able to find out what it is, unless the band wants to keep it secret. It is pretty stripped down with an acoustic guitar, but it has those two unusual touches that make this song, pretty worthwhile for the album. And then there's Doing the Cockroach, which has Isaac doing this real dancey guitar riff that really does manage to work. The guitar riff in this song is definitely pretty neat on here because it has this, this dancey kind of rhythm on it, which, definitely will keep you interested in it. And the lyrics, talk about when you're in society, you notice people kind of being kind of so-called pro-doctors or lawyers, and you're tired of hearing people talking about stereotypes and all that stuff. It talks about being on a train or a plane or something, and then there's this guy talking about, stereotypes with TV and stuff like that. And then it also refers to how when there's a bunch of fast food going on, there's some pretty there's some metaphors about the industry of fast food as well. And there's another verse in there that talks about many years from now you'll say your parents are still alive, pretty much kind of reflecting on your life. So yeah, the lyrics are pretty smart on this track, and plus I love that guitar riff. Definitely some of the best and most some of the neatest guitar playing on this song, on this album, is on this song. Cowboy Dan talks about a guy who, gets raged enough to the point where he wants to start a war, and he goes out drinking, and he just, feels like he needs that kind of stuff to survive. It refers to a guy. It refers to a guy that Isaac knew, back in the day, who was nicknamed Cowboy Dan just for no reason, and the guy hated that nickname until this song came out. And plus, Jeremiah Green's drums on this song are pretty, unusual. Like, for the first half of the song, the drums have kind of this Native American feel to them, like, not very many cymbals, more tambourine and kick drum. But then, in like the second half of the song, it goes from like, trap kit to like regular drums. But I love that kind of. I love how that drum sound has kind of a different thing going on with it. And has a bit of a rougher vibe to it. Trailer trash refers to Isaac's, a little bit to like Isaac's, childhood a little bit to when he lived in like a trailer park, like in Oregon. But then it also talks about how, living this kind of life, can be real dull and, you don't have a whole lot of money and, your life just seems to go down a lot. So it's kind of, there's definitely a little bit of humor in there for sure. Like, that's definitely one other thing Isaac's good at, blending in there. He can create some memorable lines that definitely have a lot of, kind of, humor to them. And plus I love that guitar solo at the end. Like, it has this kind of whiny feel to it that gives it kind of an emotional depth. And it definitely sounds like the kind of thing, like, it sounds as if they were maybe drunk when they recorded that, because it just has this rough, kind of raggedy feel to it, which I love. And there's, and then there's, the track, Out of Gas, which, is a little more straightforward of a song, but then there's Long Distance Drunk, which has also some pretty unusual recording techniques going on. There's like an acoustic guitar, and the bass line in the song, there's like no bass on the song. The bass line on the song sounds more like a synthesizer or something like that on here. And then there's like some pretty simple drumming, as well as the use of bongos for that unusual percussive touch. And there's a female vocalist on the track, which sounds pretty nice. Following that is the song Luck, which talks about when you're just doing jobs for like security system or, for an airport or airplanes or something like that. When you're just in the job for money, it can result in dangerous things, including death. So like the lyrics on that song really do fit in with really do fit in with the real angry guitar riff on there and Isaac's pretty dramatic vocals. This plane is definitely crashing! Like he's just yelling into the microphone, which really fits in with kind of the panicky, feel of the lyrics, which talk a little bit about just having really bad luck. And it just resulting in something horrible because you didn't think about the job as more just making big bucks. And then there's the near 11-minute epic Trucker's Atlas, which stays on a constant groove with a lot of toms in there from the drumming of Jeremiah Green. That just, the groovy drumming on that song. Just love how it's just kind of in the moment with the guitars and the bass on that one. And the lyrics talk about, how back then that's kind of how it was with traveling. No computer, no nothing. Instead, you're just kind of, going through different cities to kind of try to unload your head or something like that. So it really does reflect on kind of traveling life for the band. The lineup of the band on this album consisting of Isaac and Jeremiah and Eric Judy, who has been Brock's frequent writing partner, even though recently he quit the band back in 2012. But, we're going to miss his work with the band because he was such a great bass player in the band and some of that stuff. And like but then for like the last 5 minutes of the song, there's like a little instrumental. They're just jamming out as long as they want to, thanks to their pretty, open-minded producer, Calvin Johnson, who worked with them on this record, who, some sort of like, he's some sort of guy that wouldn't let the band just do some sort of like foolproof, pop formula. So he just, kind of kept the long jam in there. Um, and to keep things interesting, so that way our audience isn't bored by the long jam at the end. There's like some echo effects going on, like Scott Swayze and Calvin Johnson used an echoplex, reel to reel, and like basically took some of Isaac's vocal parts from earlier parts in the song and looped it into that thing to create these weird little like atmospheric sounds. And then there's also a strange sound that happens like on the mixing board. It's not an instrument. It's actually the mixing board going boo, which as Scott said in the documentary on this album, which I found was pretty interesting. Like I reviewed that documentary earlier this year. He said it wasn't supposed to be there, but they just decided to use it anyway. And the track Polar Opposites, once again, pretty straightforward. And then there's Bankrupt on Selling, which talks about how people are kind of making money and selling out and stuff like that. And, even though they don't, and even though they don't admit to it, they still get pretty sick of it. And plus, once again, some religious metaphors going on in it, like about like God learning big words in college. And the closing track is Styrofoam Boots / It's All Nice on Ice, Alright. And once again, there's definitely a lot of religious concepts with the lyrics on this song. It starts out like as kind of a little acoustic ditty, but I love how eventually it builds into like there's some drums and bass going in. Like the drums is kind of, I didn't see the drums coming. They just kind of, they just kind of come in all of a sudden, which can make you jump a little bit, but I really like it when, the song just gets faster and faster, and the drumming definitely, is very good on this song. So this album is like, it's like a near perfect indie rock album in my opinion. Like, if you never heard of Modest Mouse, I would highly recommend checking this album out, as well as some of their other great albums, like The Moon in Antarctica would have to be my second favorite album of theirs. Long Drive would have to be number 3. It's their first album. It's a pretty long title. And number 4 would have to be Good News for People Who Love Bad News. Of course, the breakthrough album with that really massive single Float On it. So Lonesome Crowded West, I'm going to have to give a 9 out of 10. This album is like just, incredible, like for a lot of different reasons, and there's not one bad song on it. So that's my review on Lonesome Crowded West, and I'll see you for episode 67.